Cats are one of the most common animals in almost any place on Earth inhabited by humans, and by some estimates, they are also the most popular household pet globally. As someone who has always lived with cats, I have often wondered of how this came to be, and what archaeology can tell us about the origins of the modern cat. As it turns out, and to no surprise, the relationship between cats and humans goes back thousands of years. What originally began as a partnership of convenience would later develop into a deeper relationship. The wild ancestors of modern cats began their interaction with humans by performing the role of a rodent control system in early agrarian societies. In the preceding centuries, cats became a part of our cultures, religions, and even members of our families, culminating in the domestication of these once aloof felines. Well, maybe not quite domesticated yet. Conventional scholarship once held that the first domestication of cats occurred in ancient Egypt, sometime prior to the Middle Kingdom. However, a startling archaeological discovery in Cyprus at the end of the 20th century completely redefined our understanding of feline domestication, pushing the timeline of our relationship with cats back thousands of years earlier, out of the Bronze Age and into the Neolithic era. Around 9,500 years ago, a young cat of 8 months was buried beside a human of approximately 30 years of age, in a small grave on the southern coast of Cyprus. The grave was found in the hills of the present-day village of Paraklesia, to the east of the city of Limassol. The ancient burial is a part of the wider archaeological site of Sillurokampos, a Neolithic village occupied from the late 9th millennium to the end of the 8th millennium BC. The French team of archaeologists who made the discovery, led by Jean-Denis Vigne, published the findings of their incredible discovery in 2004. Generating widespread media attention at the time. The burial was discovered during the field season in 1997, with the excavations at the site having started earlier in 1992. What was so significant about the Sillurokampos burial is that it not only represents the earliest known human-feline relationship, but that it also redefined our understanding as to the origins of the modern cat. Burials containing both humans and animals, especially those from the Neolithic and preceding eras, were already well known and thoroughly documented in the archaeological record prior to this discovery. Many burials had already been found across Europe, containing both humans and dogs. Cats, however, had been entirely absent up to this point. In contrast with the prehistoric Neolithic era, the historical era provides us with ample archaeological evidence, primarily from Egypt, of domesticated cats and their intentional burial by humans. These burials are often complemented by written material, which provides us with first-hand insights into the purpose behind burying cats in proximity to people. These purposes ranged from ritual, such as the caches of votive cat mummies found at the cult centre of Bastet in Bubastis, to an owner grieving the loss of his beloved pet, such as the burial of Ta Mu, a cat who belonged to Prince Thutmose of the 18th dynasty, lovingly buried in a beautifully adorned limestone sarcophagus. The gulf of time between the burial at Sillurokampos and those from Egypt still leaves us with a gap in the timeline of how wild cats came to be domesticated and spread across the world. However, the presence of an animal buried with humans can still tell us quite a lot about a society and their relationship with the natural world around them. As we first look at the Sillurokampos burial, the simplest but most important question arises: why did these villagers bury this cat and this person together? Was the cat meant as a votive offering to the deceased, as part of an animistic religious ritual? Or was it the pet of the interred human who hoped to reunite with their companion in the afterlife? To answer such questions, let's now take a closer look at the burial itself. The burial consists of 2 pits, one containing the human and various burial goods, the other containing the cat. The entire burial is not very large, consisting of just the radius surrounding the 2 occupants. The excavation report tells us that the burial goods deposited with the human consisted of 24 ocean shells, polished stones, green stone axes, flint tools, and ochre. A quick detour here. The presence of ochre in the Sillurokampos burial is very interesting, as it connects this burial to a much older region-spanning practice. From the Upper Paleolithic until the Mesolithic, ochre was almost universally present in human burials across Europe, from Spain to Russia. Ochre was often painted onto the faces of the deceased. The meaning behind this still isn't entirely understood, although theories are plentiful. It seems that this practice of using ochre in burials was being continued in some form in Cyprus during the later European Neolithic. The body of the cat was buried 40 centimetres from the human. We know that the two were interred together at the same time, as both bodies occupy the same stratigraphic layer in the soil, in addition to both body assemblages being complete. The two bodies were placed by each other on a horizontal plane, with both their heads facing west. It is unknown if this was done intentionally, as the westward orientation is seemingly confusing. Veen commented on this during an interview. "I am not completely convinced that the common orientation of the skeletons makes sense. However, if it did, I think that this strong proximity between both of them in death should be interpreted as additional evidence of a strong relationship in life." The size of this cat was larger than the domestic cats of the later Bronze Age, belonging to the species Felis sylvestris libica, the African wildcat, which hints at a possible start point in the domestication process. The cultural significance of the cat's burial alongside the human indicates that the cat was perceived as an individual by the people of Sillurokampos, and that the human shared a close relationship with the animal. The richness of the human's burial goods indicates that they were a person of importance within their community, and may have held a special spiritual role within their society in relation to animals. Perhaps this person was a practitioner or spiritual leader within an animistic belief system held by the villagers, a belief system in which cats may have played a significant role. Small carved reliefs of cat heads were found amongst the earliest archaeological phases of the village at Sillurokampos. It is also worth noting that these wildcats were imported by humans to Cyprus, which has no indigenous feline species of its own. Whether cats were brought to the island by accident or on purpose is difficult to ascertain, though given that this society was in the early stages of developing agriculture, and with the presence of votive cat figures being numerous at the site, the introduction of cats was more than likely purposeful. It is possible that the cat served a dual purpose for the people of Neolithic Cyprus, acting as both a practical resource to keep rodents away from their food stores, and possibly performing a yet-to-be-understood spiritual role in the religious practices of these people. While these findings might not be quite enough evidence to conjure up a cat-centric religion or cult practice active in Cyprus at the time, it at least provides a logical explanation as to why this human and cat were buried together. The relationship between cultural practices and spiritual belief can often be obscured, especially when examining pre-literate societies. Much ink has been spilled by anthropologists on the matter. Professor Jean Guillain, the lead of the wider Sillurokampos excavation, provided his own explanation during his interview with the BBC regarding the discovery. It's difficult to say the cat was a religious animal, but it probably played a role in the symbolic and imaginative world of these people. As to how the cat and the human came to be buried together, well, this is where things get a little dark from our contemporary perspective. There are a few possible explanations. The least likely, that both beings perished at the same time due to natural or accidental causes. The somewhat likely, that the cat may have passed shortly after the human, indicating a more standardized votive practice of burying a recently deceased cat individual with a recently deceased human individual. And unfortunately, the most likely, that the cat was killed on purpose to be buried with the human. As explorers of history, we are often confronted with practices that we may find appalling when looking at ancient cultures. This can be especially jarring when juxtaposed against our own modern values. As someone who cares deeply for cats, I myself was quite taken aback at the realization of how this young cat most likely perished. To those of you watching, the burial may also seem like a contradiction. You might be thinking, well, if the human in this burial had a strong relationship with this cat, and cats themselves were of cultural or spiritual significance to this society, why would they kill it for the burial? We need to remind ourselves that our own concept of death and the value assigned to a life cannot be applied to a culture in the past, especially as far back as this. The act of killing the cat for the burial would not have been malicious, quite the opposite. People can often hold seemingly contradictory beliefs towards religious practice. For example, in ancient Egypt, cats were highly revered animals. Purposely killing one was considered a serious offence. However, during the Ptolemaic era, temple priests were breeding and killing cats for the specific purpose of being made into mummies that worshippers could purchase and use as votive offerings to the goddess Bastet. The act of sacrificing the animal for a divine purpose was permissible in the context of the temple cult. The burial at Sillurokampos might indicate a similar mode of belief in Neolithic Cyprus. By placing ourselves into the mindset of these villagers, we might imagine diverse reasons for why this cat was sacrificed. Maybe it was a votive offering to accompany the deceased human as a guide or protector in the afterlife. Or perhaps the bond between these people and their pets was so strong that the idea of them being without their companion in the great beyond was unbearable. Personally, I'd like to think that the intention was closer to the later. As I was editing this video, I realised I'd actually overlooked a large page of the excavation report that Jean Guillain had written for Greek publication. There was a brief note where he mentions at certain points during the 8th millennium, the residents of Sillurokampos were eating the cats. Apparently, they were consuming the cats in sufficient enough numbers that we can track the effect on the community's diet. They were eating the cats. So yeah, there's that. Kinda wish I hadn't found that last page of the excavation report, to be honest. I guess that's what makes this burial even more unique, as we can tell from the excavation report that the cat has no butchering marks, so we know definitively that it was not a resource, which assigns it a special status as an individual within this community. It seems that these people had a very complex and multifaceted relationship with their cats, seeing them as companions, demousers, spiritual beings, and at times a source of food. Hey, they were nothing if not pragmatic. The archaeological site of Sillurokampos and the surrounding region, apart from the burial, is quite interesting and worth a brief explanation. If you were to approach the site on foot, you would likely pass right by it without even realising. To the naked eye, it would appear as just another unremarkable field, as the remains of the original structures of the village have not held up well over time and are in a heavily decayed state. Based on the surviving remains being post holes and pits, we can ascertain that the buildings of the village mostly consisted of wattle and daub dwellings, with accompanying deeper pits likely being wells as the settlement's primary water source. The 4 archaeological layers on the site have provided a treasure trove of information, with the site itself having yielded tens of thousands of artefacts, including evidence for the domestication of other animals, such as dogs and pigs. Mass burial sites of antlered animals were also discovered, indicating that the villagers were still using game hunting in addition to planned agriculture. Sillurokampos is mostly typical in comparison with its neighbouring contemporary settlements, such as Hirokitia and Tenta, though Sillurokampos has an absence of large structures compared to these other sites. As an island, Cyprus provides an almost perfect snapshot of developments which occurred in the wider eastern Mediterranean at the time, as changes in the archaeological landscape can be more noticeable. And this is especially true of Sillurokampos. Being located on the southern coast of Cyprus, the village sat at a crucial intersection of the Neolithic Near East. Through more recent findings in scholarship, we can deduce that the domestication of cats began in this region at this time during the Neolithic Revolution, coinciding with the development of agriculture in the Fertile Crescent. In a sort of convergent evolution, the origin of the modern cat can be traced across 5 different regions of the Near East. Sillurokampos, it seems, was at the forefront of this development, with the importation of cats coinciding with the budding development of agriculture on Cyprus, just as it had in the Near East. Not only was the concept of farming being imported to the island, but so too were the tools for protecting this new livelihood. These wild and semi-domesticated cats would have ingratiated themselves with the people of Neolithic Cyprus by eagerly intercepting the colonies of opportunistic rodents that would have been attacking the villagers' crops. Sillurokampos stands out in the archaeological record as it provides us with a groundbreaking glimpse into the origins of the human-cat relationship. The burial of the cat and the human, bonded in eternity 9,500 years ago, challenges our previous assumptions of the timeline of feline domestication. Such a unique discovery also raises intriguing questions about the cultural and spiritual significance attributed to cats in the societies of the Neolithic era. The burial at Sillurokampos stands as a testament to the complex, multifaceted roles cats played in the lives of these ancient communities, serving as companions and protectors of the very livelihood of these early Cypriot villages. If we could take away one thing above all others from this discovery, it is that the depth and diversity of human-animal relationships throughout history is a lot older and more important than we sometimes appreciate. And on a final note, if there is indeed something beyond this mortal life, I really do hope that this person and their cat found each other again in the hereafter.